Right, hello everybody, and welcome to the guest part of our podcast, Call Yourself a Wholesaler. Episode 10. A really good episode to have, Blair, this one, I think. Yeah, really good. So, episode 10, we are well and truly into it now, and I'd like to introduce the guest for this session, Blair Palmer. Hello, Blair.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm really good. I've been looking forward to this a lot.
Good. So I'll let Blair introduce herself in a moment, but Blair's background is really interesting. From the BBC to travelling in a camper van for a very long period of time, and the reason why you're on today, a lot of experience in leadership coaching. I've also worked with you a little bit as well in the past, haven't I? Which was a great experience, and I learned a lot. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Really good.
That's a lovely recommendation.
Absolutely. So I won't spoil it. I don't know all the detail. I've got obviously limited knowledge, but introduce yourself, Blair, because it's a fascinating background you've got.
Yeah. So. Actually, when I was at university, I did a law degree. It was always my dad's ambition that I'd be a lawyer, never mine. Yeah. So I was very keen not to do that, and I became a journalist almost immediately after leaving university. Worked for the BBC for a decade. I was a producer on Radio 4, BBC Radio 4 for the Today programme, Women's Hour, but really wasn't happy. So although that had been my ambition since I was pretty young, I didn't enjoy it when I got there. Yeah. And there might be other people that are like that this is their second career, or this is something that they found sort of by accident. Yeah. And I found coaching by accident. So I was a producer at the BBC on Women's Hour, and we did a story about what at the time was a brand new profession called life coaching, and I just thought I'd rather do that than this. So in 2000, I left the BBC.
2000, okay. Yeah.
Became a life coach, but I didn't stay a life coach very long, because quite early on, I coached some people who were in leadership positions, really just accidentally. And I thought, this is much more advising people on their love lives and, how to organise their, school pickup or whatever. It wasn't my passion. Yeah. But it turned out that working with leaders on how to engage their people, how to be the best boss that those people had ever had, and then how to translate that into business success, then I felt, okay, this is my calling. So really, for the last 25 years, that's what I've been doing. But I still work with some people one-to-one today. But in that 25 years, I've written 4 books. I'm now a keynote speaker. I run leadership and change programs for all sorts of organisations. So, it's evolved.
Amazing.
Quite a lot.
But you found your space.
I did.
We're probably not going to touch on love life today.
No,
I don't think.
Please don't ask me about that. That's 100% guaranteed to be bad advice.
Although there will be a lot of people in our industry that might want to learn more on that, but. Okay, Brill. So why have we invited Blair on today, everybody? So everybody knows that's been listening to our podcast now that we like to offer something different. And this is hopefully where people are going to listen in and they're going to really learn some things from today. And I think you can, from our conversation we're going to have today, I think you can really hit some spots where it could be a man in a van with an apprentice that's on day one of his journey, to a man or a lady in Canary Wharf managing 200 people or directing 200 people. So you've dealt with, over 25 years, a lot of different styles and a lot of different people, and hopefully today our listeners will get something from that. So super duper. And we will touch on one of your books today as well, definitely, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Blair. So, icebreakers. So we always do this as at the start of the podcast, just so it gets a bit of a feel as to what you are and who you are as a person, Blair. So, nice easy one. Favourite food?
So this is interesting, right? Because since the age of 14, I was a vegetarian.
Okay.
And last year, I started eating meat again. So I don't know how long it is. I'm
crikey.
not going to tell people because then they work out how old I am. But it's a long time, right?
Yeah.
And so I've got to say that my favourite thing now is a lovely bit of steak, like a lovely
fantastic.
fillet steak,
Yeah.
something like that. A little bit of herb butter on it.
Yeah.
That would absolutely. If someone says to me, "We're going out for a meal, and I'll take you to a steak place,"
That's
100% I'm in.
Yeah, fantastic. Love that. And again, it would be in my top 3, I would imagine, steak as well. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Favourite decade, Blair? What would you say your favourite decade was?
Gosh, this is hard, isn't it? I mean, music-wise,
Yeah.
I would say late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
But not pop stuff. More sort of indie. Like back then, I was really into The Cure,
Okay.
for instance, The Police,
Yeah.
Blondie, that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
yeah, some slightly more edgy indie
Yeah.
stuff from the late 70s, early 80s.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And the current day with the technology and the way the world's evolved in the last 20, 30 years, very different.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff that I think is incredible, and maybe we'll touch on the potential for AI.
Yes, yeah.
I'm sort of blown away always when I'm accessing something via AI. My daughter, who's 17, she says, "You find that exciting, do you? You think that's cool, do you?" Because it's just normal to her. But to me, what you can do
That's it.
is, and what you will be able to do is very exciting. But in terms of the uncertainty, how hard it is today, even just to make ends meet.
Yeah.
This is kids growing up today are probably the first generation really ever who will be less well off in their adulthood than their parents were.
Yeah.
And that's pretty tragic.
That's
So
the reality,
so there
isn't it? Yeah.
are lots of bits of today that I don't find.
And just on the music thing, and again, I'm not here to plug a movie or anything, but I've just watched the Bob Dylan movie at the cinema, and I tell you what a great film that is. And obviously it's a bit like the Queen film, so you get to really experience what it was like. And as you say, back in those early sort of music, when music seemed really hit, it was really impressive. So right, and the last icebreaker. So I know you've met a lot of famous people, Blair, haven't you? So who is your favourite famous person, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, when I worked at the BBC, obviously people would come into the studio all the time, so you would get to meet people. I would say, and this is a strange one in a way, but I met Monica Lewinsky.
Oh, did you?
And she was in the UK. Obviously, everything had kind of blown up in America over her affair with President Clinton. And she came on our show. She came on Woman's Hour, and I went down to meet her. And she was just this very sweet, quite shy, ordinary girl, pretty, attractive woman, but she was completely unprepared for the vitriol of the British press.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because
they were so mean to her, including women journalists.
Yeah,
and I just thought she was adorable, and I thought, how unfair that somebody so powerful as Clinton his life isn't affected really at all, and yet hers is destroyed.
Yeah.
And now I follow her on social media, and she's very funny about it. So she's got a great sense of humour, and she's also really great campaigner for women and for equality. So yeah, she's a cool.
Wow, absolutely, that's a great pick. Fascinating. So let's get into it, Blair.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I said, we'd love to touch on one of your books, but if we can just leave that until a little bit later on. And as you've touched on already, it'd be great to get your view on leadership against AI or combined with AI as well as we go through.
Yeah.
So with your experience, Blair, over the last 25 years, what is there a actual written rule for a successful business?
No.
I knew that was going to be your answer.
No, because I mean, for one thing, you can do everything right in a way, and your business can still fail. We know that cash is king, and you can have a few bad months, and because of those few bad months, you just don't have the resources to carry on,
Yeah.
even though you've got a really, really good model. And if you'd have just had enough money to get through those few months, you would have then taken off. So
Yeah.
we all know, I've been running a business for 25 years. There have definitely been some squeaky times in that.
Yeah.
And it's not been a failing of leadership or even failing of the business model. It's just one of those things. So no. Equally, we know that there are terrible businesses that just seem to survive, either because they're too big to fail. We saw that with banks, during
Yes.
the recession. They get bailed out or whatever. Or just because some businesses are allowed to run with a huge deficit for many, many years that a smaller business just can't do. So, no. However, I think that there is evidence that the culture of an organisation, which is the sort of the ethos, what that organisation stands for, that has a huge impact on the success of a business. Because when people, and this can be a 2-person business or a 2,000-person business, when people can bring all of their talents and skills, their whole self to their work, you're going to get more out of them,
Absolutely,
aren't
yeah.
you? And so if you're getting 50% of the people that you employ versus you're getting 95% of the people that you employ, which one is better value in a sense? It's the organisation where you get 95%.
Yeah, absolutely. So whilst we're on that, leaders, a lot of directors, managers, leaders, however you want to call them, owners of businesses, everyone's got their own style and everyone's got their own personality, their own emotions. When you're managing one person or 20 people, how much of a blocker can your leadership style be to the person receiving it on the other end? Because they're different to me, or they're different to yourself. So, how does a leader manage that step in terms of getting that information across to the employees?
For me, leadership development is personal development.
Yeah.
So it's not about, if I assume a particular style that I read about in a book, or that Stephen Bartlett has, or somebody else that I admire, then that'll be the right style.
Yeah.
It isn't that. It's about yourself and about investing in your own personal development, your self-awareness, your ability to understand how the things that you say and what you don't say, the kind of subtle ways that you behave impact other people. It isn't about adopting a particular personality type that you think, I've seen someone do this, or this is what my first boss did with me, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Or this is what my first boss, so I'm going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Right? It isn't that. It's much more subtle.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't want to make it sound too complicated. The better a human being you can become, the better a leader you'll be.
Yes.
Now, and ultimately that's it, which is different to management. Management is a bit more about technique.
Yeah.
Making sure you're giving regular feedback, that you're sitting down with people and giving them some guidance, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Listening to their concerns, doing an appraisal, which they do in some bigger organisations. How to interview for new staff. That's management technique, and that is more technique. But leadership is about just becoming a better and more self-aware person, so you can see the impact you're having on others.
And that could be, you could improve something at home, you could improve fitness, you could all that sort of thing, couldn't you? Your sleep patterns, etc. And it's also, what I find is very, very important, certainly in my experience, is connecting with the emotional side of the person that you're leading.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, everyone's got a different style, as I say, and some people will be from the top down telling, other people will be from the bottom up receiving. And there is that fine balance, isn't there, of really getting that right. And it's a tough one for our listeners out there that, as I say, that have got an apprentice in a van tomorrow to managing a big manufacturing plant in Birmingham. It's such a fine line.
It's actually a little easier to be yourself when it's just you and one other person in a van.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard not to be yourself, actually, because there's an intensity to that relationship that means that you end up showing who you are inevitably. But in that situation, it is actually really important to think about, well, who am I being then? because the young person, the apprentice or whatever, who's sitting alongside you as you go from one thing to the other, they're seeing everything.
Yeah.
And so there is a little bit of self-management required there.
Yeah.
So that it's a professional relationship, so that they're getting something really valuable from you. You are their main influence.
Yeah.
And you're forming them, especially if they're quite young. This might be their first experience of really being in the workplace. Yeah. And how you are is going to impact the rest of their career, the rest of their future. So it is actually really important. In a bigger organisation, let's say you do have 200 people in your organisation, then it is harder to show who you are. It's easier to hide behind the mask and not show the vulnerability. I don't mean that you have to let it all hang out. I mean, it's still the workplace, right? It's still professional. But if you can show up as your real self, if you can know who you are, and then show up as your real self and be working on yourself in that way, then that is really opens the door to becoming a great leader.
And do you think that's changed more recently in the current way of leading rather than what it was, say, two decades ago? Do you think that's really...
For sure, 100%. Our expectations of leaders are changing.
Yeah.
So it might have worked brilliantly to be a bit more buttoned up and a bit more, I've got myself at home and I've got myself at work and these are two separate people and I'm happy with it that way. And everyone was sort of fine with it.
Yeah.
But we live at a time when we tend not to trust authority figures. We don't trust politicians, and we don't trust leaders of big business. And so trust is really important. If you don't trust the people that you work with, then you're not going to speak up, you're not going to share your ideas, you're not going to say when there's a problem, you're not going to say when you've made a mistake. That's really, really dangerous for a business. So there's got to be trust. And you foster trust by having these personal relationships, but what I call authentic human connection, really connecting.
Okay. So your recommendation these days in this current world is that you need to show more of your personality, open up more to your people, basically.
Yeah. And I mean, and you benefit from that too.
Yeah.
It's actually really hard to keep the mask up.
Yeah, the false identity.
It really is. It's very stressful. So actually bringing a bit more of yourself is good for everybody.
Yeah. No, good. So connected to that, obviously with leaders and staff, employees, and people that you work with, the old way of leading and the new way of leading, if there is if you want to put it that way, or there is a difference. How does AI come into all of this then, Blair? Because in your recent book, you focus on the Victorian style leadership that's still here today against how quickly technology is moving on to try and help businesses. So just explain to our listeners, how that works in your head and how the AI thing comes in and takes over.
I mean, there'll be a lot of people that don't know much about AI. They're not using it, or they don't know that they're using it. It might be built into some of the apps that they use on a day-to-day basis, but they're
without
not
knowing.
Without knowing.
Yeah.
But there's lots of different kinds of AI coming in now. One of them is this ability to for artificial intelligence to access a lot of information and then distill it down. So I might use that with something like Copilot, Microsoft's AI, and I might ask Copilot. It's a bit like asking Google.
Yes.
But instead of having to sift through lots of websites or whatever, it'll just give me its answer. Yeah. So what I'm just trying to think of an example. I was asking the other day, if I wanted to make money really, really fast, what are some of the ways that I could do that? Yeah. And, well, Blair, here are some ways. And then it just kind of tells me, like literally talking to it like it's an assistant or an intern. or
robot.
Yeah, like it's a robot.
Yeah.
So that's one kind. That's called generative AI. Another kind of AI that's coming is called agenic, which is it can sift through data and patterns and make recommendations or even make decisions that you then sign off.
Yeah, clever.
And it's really clever. So for a business, for instance, what it might do, if you're thinking about, we want to have stock but we don't want to have too much stock because it's just sitting there.
Yeah.
But we don't equally want to run out of stock. So this kind of AI would be able to monitor past patterns, but it might also be able to say, 2 years ago, this customer bought this thing.
Yeah.
And based on previous data, it's probably going to need replacing soon.
Yeah. Yeah, because of warranty or...
Shall we buy... would you like me to buy that in?
Yeah.
And you go, yeah. And then, surprise, surprise, next week, that customer rings you up and says, that bit of kit that you installed is playing up a bit. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
No surprise to us because our AI told us this was probably going to happen. Yeah. And so we've got the stock waiting. And this is really clever.
That's really clever. And that's how it's moved on so fast, hasn't it? You know, even going back to the days when Microsoft came out and Amstrad and all that, you know, now we are in a totally different level of support, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
So, and that's great. But how slowly is leadership styles adapting to AI?
Well, there's a few things. So firstly, some of the technical expertise that you currently trade on won't have much value.
Yeah.
Right? Because the AI will do it. The AI will be able to predict better than you, even with your 20 or 30 years of experience, or diagnose an issue, or make recommendations, or work to a budget, or calculate the manpower required for a particular job or whatever. Those skills will be less and less valuable. We'll still need to check the AI is right. We're not going to let the AI make all the decisions, but we'll leave a lot of that. So then, what do you need from human beings?
Yeah.
You need the stuff that only human beings can do. So it's the relationship stuff. Yeah. It's the relationship that you have with customers or with suppliers or with the people in your own organization.
Yeah.
It's the creativity, imagination, you know, coming up with new ideas. AI can distill down other ideas that other people are doing.
Yeah.
But it can't come up with something brand new.
Yeah.
And so then as a leader of people, you have to change the way you're leading, because you're not trying to just get people to use their expertise, because a lot of that's being done by the AI. Instead, you're trying to create an environment where people bring their humanity.
Yeah.
And it is a different style of leadership. It's less about what did you do today, because you could have done a lot, but it didn't make a difference.
Yeah.
What difference did you make today?
Yeah.
Well, I formed a better relationship with one of our customers. Did they buy anything? No. They're not going to buy anything today. Yeah. But when they do buy, they're going to buy from us because of the relationship.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's a really key point. It goes back to what we were saying earlier on about the emotions and about being personable, because a machine can't do that.
No.
And that's the difference between... Our industry is a great example, to be fair. The construction industry, the electrical wholesale, the manufacturing... It's all built around relationships. You know, yes, we sell product, and product goes behind walls and light fittings, etc. But our industry was built around relationships. And at the moment, AI or a robot and a machine cannot do that. So it's about the balance, Blair, I guess, of growing into the new leadership way, rather than being too, you know, as you said earlier on, Victorian and going back in... you know, back to when it was like in the 80s or the 90s, should we say, to managing the speed of this technology growth, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, you know, there's a lot to be scared of when it comes to AI, because what we haven't yet got is AI that, we do have AI that learns, but if you imagine just how quick it processes, if we let it could take over.
Yeah, what is it to think? Yeah.
I mean, people aren't wrong to be scared about that. However, in the meantime, if we can get AI to do a lot of this stuff better than human beings do it, because anything that doesn't benefit from human emotion, we're better off getting... It's very hard for humans to turn their emotion off. Yeah. So emotion ends up influencing their decisions. Anything where that would be a problem, we get the technology to at least make those recommendations.
Yeah.
And then, we focus on how we can bring out the best in our people to be as people-y as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then one final question on this. What do you think is wrong with the way we think about leadership these days, based on what we've just said about things evolving with AI?
I think that because we have this slightly old-fashioned idea about leadership, which is somehow trying to get people to be as predictable and machine-like as possible. You know? So I will lead people, and I'm putting that in inverted commas because it's not really leadership, but I will lead people to do just what I want them to do, but try to convince them it was their idea or something, you know. But ultimately, can't they just do what I want them to do?
Yeah.
Actually, the new approach to leadership that's required is, how do I get them to think for themselves?
Yeah.
You know, how do I get them to come up with their own ideas, to come up with their own solutions?
Yes.
Because there isn't then just my brain on this. There's their brain as well.
Yeah.
And that's got to be better. So it's got to be better in terms of the quality of decisions and the innovation and the ideas and all of that. It's harder because it's much easier when people don't have an opinion. They just do.
Yeah, you just say it.
Just
you
do
crack on.
what they're told. But the problem is they're just not going to do what they're told. So even if they say, yes, I will do what I am told, either they don't, and lots of managers of people will know that that's the case. Well, hang on a minute, we agreed.
Yeah.
You said you were going to do this. It's 2 weeks later and you haven't done it. So we all know that problem, even when people agree.
Yeah.
But also, it's just your brain. And your brain can't be as intelligent as both brains together.
That's right.
And when people are just doing what they're told, your job has got to be to do all the thinking and the telling. And your whole job is, they come to you and they say, what should I do next? And then you tell them what to do. That keeps you really, really busy. And you can't think about what's coming around the corner. How do we anticipate change? What about this AI? What are we going to do about it? What are the threats to our industry, and how are we going to flex and adapt so that we aren't taken down by this? That's actually your job, not just issuing orders to people.
And I agree 100%. And if anything, it's thank you to your coaching that I got from when I worked with you, Blair, before, where it's getting your employees to come up with the ideas. They're going to be far more engaged if they're coming up with the ideas than what it is constantly going to be fed down and dictated down, isn't it?
Yeah, and listen, sometimes their ideas aren't going to be great.
Yeah.
Right? And so, firstly, if an idea is really terrible, then your job isn't to just say, that's a terrible idea, let's do it my way. Your job is to help them to think like you do. So what's stopping them from coming up with a great idea? Is it just lack of experience? In which case, what experiences can you give them to enlighten them? Is it just that they haven't had a chance to think about it like you have? And how can you give them a chance? What can you show them or tell them, or some space that you can create so they can think for themselves, not just to dive in? And of course, sometimes it's too risky to go with their decision, and you say, okay, that's good. However, here are some of the risks of that.
Yeah.
Here's what I would do. How about we try that and we see how it goes?
Yeah.
And so you still have some, your expertise still counts.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not all about you moving what's in your brain into their brain. That's really inefficient.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be something that you've been thinking about for 3 weeks, and then suddenly you pile it down on them, and they're like, whoa. And they're like, well,
exactly. They haven't had a chance to process it. And so it's just your idea. They don't really understand. They're trying to do their best, but they're just funneling your idea.
Yeah.
Whereas if you give them a chance, you've had 3 weeks to think about it.
Yeah.
They deserve a bit of time to process.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good. So great, really interesting. We could go on about AI and the way leadership style links to it all day, really, but we'll move on. So what's your view on process and, or too much process, as the case may be, and things like KPIs, Blair? What's your view on that in leadership?
Look, I think you need to know what you're measuring.
Yeah.
But the problem with a lot of KPIs is that they drive behaviour that then results in the wrong kind of measures or outputs. So if we take number of sales calls.
Yes.
Now, we all know, and anyone who's been in sales knows, the more people you talk to, the more likely you are to make a sale. All right. So then the KPI becomes the number of sales calls.
Yeah.
But that people can game that system. They could make 100 calls and not win any new business.
Yeah. Or not do it very well.
Or not do it very well
Yeah.
because of who they're calling or the quality of they're just racking up numbers.
Yeah.
So what really matters actually is the intent behind the call.
Yeah.
Do people understand the impact or the outcome that is intended by these actions? And when everything is process, people stop thinking. They just do the process regardless of whether the process is having the impact.
Yeah.
Whereas when people are thinking about impact or outcome, then let's say they do have a target of 30 calls in a day. But after the first 5, they're like, there's something wrong with this list because I've made 5 calls and they've all hung up on me. Now, I could make another 25 calls today and they could all hang up on me.
Yeah.
Or I could ask, is there something wrong with this list? Because it might be better that I make 1 call or I take 1 person out to lunch and get the sale than that I make 30 calls today.
So 30 calls
pointless
that will go
calls
to, exactly.
on a bad list of people, and the script is wrong and I haven't anticipated then. I don't know these people.
Yeah.
And they already have strong relationships with someone else and I'm just some idiot they don't know calling up to try to pitch them something. Actually, who are they? What is the relationship they already have? What are they dissatisfied about that relationship? How do I build a relationship that's as strong as the relationship they have? And that might be by making 1 call today, but it's the right call. And I've spent the other 7.5 hours today researching this guy.
Yeah.
So that's where for me, there was a company that I worked with years ago, and they were a parcel delivery company. And the board were going around looking at some of their warehouses. And they went into one of the warehouses, and in the corner was a big pile of parcels.
Yeah.
And the CEO said, "What's that?" And the person that was showing them around said, I don't know what that is. And we got back to the office and the board said, we need more process because there's a pile of parcels there. No one knows what they are and that can't happen. We need more process. And I said, it seems to me that the more process we put in, the more this stuff starts happening because people think, I see a pile of parcels, but it's not in my process to do anything about it. It's not my job. Walk straight past it. Whereas if we strip out some of the process and we say our intent is to get people their parcels as quickly as possible, then when someone walks past a pile, they're like, I've seen that pile sitting there for a week. Someone's not getting their parcels as quickly as possible. What's going on? And then they get curious and then they find out. So it becomes it's not written into anyone's job description, but everybody cares about the same
because that's the objective. The final objective is to
get
those
the
delivered.
parcels to the people.
Yeah.
Right.
Brilliant. Okay. And what about approval levels in line with process and KPIs? What's your view on approval levels within business?
So this is particularly a problem in a bigger organisation.
Yeah.
In smaller organisations, everyone just pitches in, and everyone kind of has to make decisions in a way. But in a bigger organisation, decision making gets passed up the chain and then back down, and when it comes back down, it's normally not a very good decision because it was made with scant information from people that don't work on the ground anymore and don't really know how things are going to play out. However, it is really important that certain decisions are made at certain levels because different information is held in different parts of the business and people have different expertise and levels of experience. You don't necessarily want someone who's brand new to the organisation making really, really big decisions just because, because they were, I don't know, they were in the moment and they just made a big decision.
Yeah. Or their experience, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I prefer to think about this as everyone in a business has a role and there are certain decision-making responsibilities that go with that role.
Yeah.
So people get really clear about what their role is. In other words, what's the difference I'm supposed to make in my job? And how does that difference impact our organisation, so everyone can see the connection between what they're doing every day and the success of the business. And these decisions sit with that role. And I am best placed to make those decisions because I'm the one talking to the customer, or I'm the one fitting the piece of kit or whatever.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they don't talk to anyone. So they might seek advice and input. They might ask people how making certain decisions would affect other things in the business or other roles in the business. But ultimately, in the end, they're responsible for making that decision.
Yeah.
And that decision is appropriate for their job and for their level of expertise. But then they have to sit with the consequences of that decision,
right?
Right? So they can't just... The problem with all this passing things, approval up and down, is no one gets the blame. Because it's always possible to say, well, we all agreed, or, I didn't agree, but I was told I had to, or whatever. If it's going to be your decision in the way I'm describing, then there's a consequence. It doesn't mean just because it didn't work, you're fired, but it means it didn't work, what did you learn?
Yeah.
Right, and what would you do differently next time?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's giving the responsibility to the guys that are actually a bit like the book by David Marquette, and about giving the information, the authority, to where the information is, and that generally is the guys that are busy on site doing boxes or whatever it may be, or the guys in a trade counter or a sales office that are constantly dealing with customers.
Yeah.
How does the manager or the next level up have a say in that scenario, because they're the ones that's there.
Yeah, exactly. And if people want to know that, the David Marquette book, Turn the Ship Around, really, really good thing to read. And then he wrote a second book called Leadership is Language, which I think is fantastic as well. Yeah. And I of all the leadership books, apart from my own, that I would recommend his. They're
brilliant.
Great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right, so absolutely perfect. Let's move on to your latest book then, Blair. So you introduce it, the name, what the thought process was behind it. Let our listeners know exactly what it's about, please, Blair. Okay. Yeah.
So the book is called Punks in Suits: How to Lead the Workplace Reformation. And the idea of a punk in a suit, it's a quote from the film Kick-Ass 2. And the actual quote is, "There's no room for punks in suits, just real heroes who can really kick ass."
Yeah.
But I don't think we need heroes that are going around kicking ass, leaders that are just, making demands and issuing orders. I think we need a few punks in suits. So whatever it is, I know a lot of people listening to this don't go to work in a suit, but the punk is the inside, revealing something about yourself, the things that make you unique, and bringing that to your leadership. So that's the idea of it. And it was really born out of, I had been using this phrase and I'd been talking about a lot of this stuff pre-COVID, but I was, as a conference speaker, I was saying, there's, some stuff coming down the road, AI, Gen Zs are going to be joining the workplace. Yeah. There's going to be a thing called hybrid working, remote working. Everyone was like, nah, never going to happen. Anyway, then COVID, and then all this stuff becomes real. And so that really caused me to rethink, okay, when we come out of COVID, how is the world different, and what do we need from leaders in business, in politics and all of that as well, but it's not really my area. So what is it that we need from leaders in organizations, big and small? And that's when I realized we're still sort of stuck with this Victorian idea that people are basically machines, and that the job of leadership is to get people to be as efficient and predictable and machine-like as possible, and actually just doesn't work. And it's one of the reasons why businesses are finding it. There's a lot of reasons why it's hard to make money. Cost of supply and all that cost of goods, inflation, all those kind of things. Yeah. It's all hard, but it's particularly hard if you treat people like machines, because like I said before, they can't bring everything that they have to offer, so you're not getting everything that you hired. That's terribly inefficient. So we really have to rethink that now.
And we've touched on it a little bit before, haven't we, about that, the Victorian, the AI and the adaptation. But so on So we can't talk about the whole book, obviously, and you're not here to read it. But
although I do read it, if people want the audio book, they can have me reading it while they're driving around in their van.
So, firstly, whilst we're on that, where can the listeners listen to it or pick it up, Blair?
Yeah, so it's available on all the normal online. I mean, Amazon, but anywhere else that you buy your books. In paper book, but also there's a Kindle version, and there is the audio book read by me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm nearly finished the book, and it is a real good insight. One thing I really liked was, and this might sound a really silly thing, but it helped me. I listened to the book, and I've listened to other books in the past, and you switch off because of what you're listening to. Yeah. And I felt with yours, it was engaging.
Oh, good.
And I felt that was really good. So if our listeners do go to the Audible version, I feel that it's a good listen when you're in the car or whatever it may be, walking the dog or whatever.
Yeah.
So on the book, you touched on so much good stuff, and we've touched on a few bits already. But three things I'd like to ask you, if that's okay, that are sort of in reference to what's in the book. Number one, what's your view on working from home?
Okay. So, I personally love working from home, and I know that a lot of people do. A lot of people don't, right? They want the interaction, particularly young people, need to be with more seasoned people to learn how to do the job, right?
Exactly.
And they often don't have a great setup at home as well. They're working from a bedroom in a shared flat or whatever. It's not ideal. But equally, some types of work are better done with other people. I mean, that the actual physical work has to be done. Some of it has to be done on location. It can't be done from home. You know, you can't fit someone's lights from home.
Yeah. If you're on site.
You have to be there. But equally, when it comes to office, it's really useful sometimes for getting together, those informal connections, the social side of work, the coming up with ideas and brainstorming and creative. All of that is much better done. I prefer to think of it as someone used this term that I really like, gathering. You know, when is it better that we gather? Some people will find that slightly, don't like that language, but I really like it.
Because I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's not about having a meeting.
Yes.
Right? Because meetings you might as well do online.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes meetings are there for meeting's sake.
Sometimes, better not to have the meeting at all.
Exactly.
Or the meeting isn't the meeting really. The meeting is the formal thing, but actually the real decisions are made in the corridor. Before or after the meeting, and that's where you need to be.
Yeah.
So, but I think of it as, when should we gather? When should we get together for what kind of work? But also, I think that the mistake about, I just wrote something about this actually on LinkedIn about working from home being seen as a perk. And I don't think we should think of working at home as a perk. It's not about being able, it's not really about being able to take the kids to school in the morning and walk your dog.
No.
It's about, where is the best place for me to do the work that I've been hired to do.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
And sometimes the best place is at home, because what I need is quiet. I need to just be able to rattle through stuff. I don't need a lot of interruptions, and then I can be at home. But sometimes the best place to do the work is in an office, because someone else is reliant on me to do their job, and we both need to be together, or because we're going to do some creative thinking, or because I need to make these connections of trust and authentic connections, so that when I am working at home and I'm sending someone an email, they don't misinterpret the email, right? Yeah. Or sometimes it's on location, it's on site, or it's with our suppliers, or it's with our customers, or it's with one of our key stakeholders or our investors. Where is the best place to do the work? Yeah. And that's got lost slightly in the whole work-life balance argument.
And it's different for every workplace, obviously, but I think you're right. I think it is where are you most valuable, and where can you get that job done. If it is a client lunch, you obviously can't do that at home unless you have them in your kitchen, but ultimately it's the same as if you store things up for the week, for example. I know people do that they purposely say, I'll hold on to that, I'll do that later, later, and then suddenly your time is probably more valuable being away from distraction. So you're absolutely right. No, I agree. Right, thanks Blair for that. It's I think there's there's definitely a perception from everybody on what working from home is, really. And certain people view it differently to others, let's just say.
Okay.
So, question number 2, again, related to the book. You mention about handing in your laptop on the last day. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a metaphor because obviously not everyone is tied to their laptop, depends on your job.
Yeah.
But this is a little dark, but there's a saying that on your deathbed, in the last few moments of your life, you come face to face with who you could have been in your life. Yeah. And I find that very sobering because hopefully you're lying there thinking, yeah, I'm pretty happy. Yeah. I was myself.
Yeah.
I did the things. I had an adventure.
Yeah.
Yes, there were ups and downs, but fundamentally, I'm
came
proud
and did a
of the life.
podcast
Yeah, I did it
with lamps. Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. That's right. Or you could be lying there thinking, oh no, I wasted it. I could have been more myself. I could have been bolder. I could have had adventures, but I played it safe. I didn't stand for what, really stand for. I let people down. I wasn't the best version of myself.
Yeah.
And it's too late to do anything about it in that moment. So I took that idea and thought about the last day of your working life, which of course used to be in your early 60s, but now probably going to be when you're 80 something, right? But anyway,
don't.
I mean, that's the way it's going. So, but there will be a sort of a time in your life where you scale back, or where you hand in your lanyard, or you hand in your laptop, or you hand over your toolkit or whatever for the last time, and that's sort of it. And then you come face to face with who you could have been. You sell your business, whatever it might be, who you could have been in your professional life and as a leader. And you could have that same sense of, I compromised my values. I didn't really stand up for people. I played it safe. I played politics. I let myself down a little bit. Or you could feel like, look, it wasn't always easy, and I wasn't always the most popular person. And sometimes it cost me, but I was true to myself. I did the very best I could for people. I did the very best I could for our customers and clients, and for the planet even. And I'm pretty proud of what I've left behind. I'm satisfied that I did the best.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when you're in a meeting, and you could just be quiet, and you could let a thing just happen, and you think of that. You think of that moment, and you think, what will future me think of this moment? It's a crossroads.
Yeah.
And then you decide to say something. And maybe you don't win the argument, it's fine. It's not like you have to be doggedly determined on everything. You don't have to make yourself the sort of the pariah. You don't want to be excluded from conversations. You still want to be invited to the meeting. So there's a little bit of sophistication required here. If you make yourself too difficult, they just don't tell you what's going on, and they don't invite you, and you're not part of it. So you still want to be at the table. But I often say, if you're not willing to put your opinion or your expertise or your lens on the table, why are you in the meeting in the first place? You literally could be out doing something else, walking the dog or something.
A lot of that, handing in your laptop or handing in your tools or whatever it may be, a lot of that is regret ultimately. Looking back, and have you done the best you could have possibly done for your working life? And again, connected to leadership, different styles, a lot of stuff we've touched on today. I think that struck out to me in your book quite a lot. I did think to myself, well, when I do hand my laptop in when I'm 85, thanks. Would I be able to look back and say, yeah, I've done okay? Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? Brilliant. Yeah. No, really, really good, and a great way of putting it, a real way of putting it. It helps us understand. Number 3, and a big one. This change. So again, another topic you could touch on for a long time. But what's your view on change and how it's led, or even how it's received?
So, there is, as you say, a lot I could say about this. I think, everything has to be changing all the time. right now. You know, that there isn't sometimes organizations or leaders in organizations will say, listen, you know, this is a change program, and then at the end of this, things will settle down. And that really is a lie, because they won't. There's this change, and there's other changes, and then there's the next change, and there's change happening simultaneously. We have to constantly be tweaking and adapting what we're doing. So change is a reality of life. It's a cliche, but it's true. So then we have to become better at it. And that means not making promises like, once this has happened, things will settle down, knowing that that's not true. That's a lie, so don't say that. But more importantly is to understand that people are actually good at change. There's this myth that humans are bad at change. And so when you're trying to change things in an organization, or you're trying to change the way your customers behave, for instance, get them to buy online, or get them to buy green, or whatever it is, that, they're resistant because people are bad at change. People are not bad at change. Human beings are brilliant at change. They change things all the time. They get married and have children, and they change job, and they buy a new house, and they go to new places on holiday.
Car.
Exactly. People changing things all the time. So you can't blame that. But there is an emotional element of change. So again, what the old-fashioned, the Victorian idea is, people are logical, like a machine. So if you explain to them why you're doing a thing, then they will, it'll be obvious that's the only thing, and they'll agree, and then they'll do it.
Yeah.
But people are not logical. They are emotional.
Yes.
The person who's made that decision has been influenced by emotion, even if they don't know. And the people that they're trying to influence are emotional, not logical.
Yeah.
And change is emotional, not logical. So if you think about any change that you've actually done in your life, it will have come from an emotional, almost change of mind.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Not logic. Because, I mean, if we take fitness, for instance, you know, everyone knows logically how to live a life that is healthy and where they're fit.
Yeah.
But most people don't do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because logic isn't enough. When the cake is sitting there on the table, the emotion is, I deserve it, I've had a bad day, it looks delicious, I deal with this tomorrow, you only live once.
Yeah.
You know, it's an emotional, emotion overrules logic.
Yeah, connection to the cake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to change, this is a random example, but you have to change your relationship with the cake.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to see the cake, feel differently about the cake. In order to not eat it. And the same goes with change. If you're asking people to adopt a new technology, or to buy from you in a different way, or to lead in a different way, then something has to shift at an emotional level. That's why I like that handing in your laptop thing, because it allows for an emotional change rather than just, you'll get more out of people if you treat them right.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
Okay.
but, you know, it's going to cost more, and right now money is everything, and we just can't afford it.
Yeah.
But when you're handing in your laptop, or when you're lying on your deathbed, what will you wish you had done in this moment? And that's the emotion. So scrap the belief that people are bad at change, because that just makes you complacent, and actually assume people are good at change. What is it that they're finding emotionally challenging about this change, and how do we emotionally get them on board with the change?
Great, really interesting stuff, that. And I will say, you concentrate on that in the book quite a lot, which I really enjoyed that part of it, because it's so relevant to today. Everybody is constantly trying to come up with new ideas, constantly trying to beat the competition, or whatever it may be better. And that is ultimately change. And if it's a leader doing it, the likelihood is the people that sit underneath this leader, the employees, have got to go along with it and change. So important in leadership, and the way you bring it across in the book, Blair. Again, it's easy to listen to and easy to understand. So excellent. So they're one of the three things: the working from home view, the handing in your laptop, which I loved, and obviously change, which is so important in leadership. So we're near the end of the podcast now, Blair. But I just, before we go, I want you to have the chance to share your contact details and remind people of the company name and also the book name, etc., and other things that you've done, the other books that you've written. But 3 tips. What were the 3 tips if you could give out today to leaders or managers that are listening? What would they be?
Okay. So firstly, look at when we think about trust, and I've mentioned how important that is, we tend to think of being trustworthy. But I think that the other aspect of that is being willing to trust. Trusting other people, trusting their intention is good. Not that they're going to get it right all the time, but that their intent is to do a good job. And starting from that, rather than assuming most people are trying to get away with something, or, managing people for the bad apples. You start with believing that people's intent is to do a good job.
Yes.
And so then the first tip is, what are the limits that you put on your willingness to trust people, and how could you extend that a little? How could you give people a little bit more freedom on the basis that you're trusting that they're trying to do their best? So that would be number one. Secondly, instead of being the answers person all the time, be the person with some great questions that get people thinking. It's a huge pressure to have all the answers all the time, and you don't have all the answers all the time.
No.
And you're much better off asking some great questions that get other people to think, even if they're asking you to do the thinking for them.
Yeah.
Because that's easier for them to come and say, what should I do? And the easiest thing to do is just to tell them.
Yeah.
But then they have to come and ask you because they've stopped thinking, and then that becomes your job. So
great point.
Every time someone comes to you and says, what should I do next? Ask them a great question. Ask them a question that begins with what or how.
Yes.
What are your options? How is it going so far?
How would you do it?
How would you do it?
Yeah.
How do you think I would do it if it were me? What and how questions to get them to think, including, all right, what are you going to do, and how can I support you? So these are some nice questions.
Yeah, I really like that.
Be the questions person. And the third thing, and this is a big thing, it is to try to... A lot of businesses are a bit evil, right? They're bad for the world, and we're seeing a lot of that right now, particularly in the States, but it's not exclusively in America.
Yeah.
Try to be one of the good guys. Try to make sure that your business is at least benign, that sort of doesn't do anything bad.
Yeah.
But actually, how can your business be a force for good in the world? And I've been to a few businesses in this sector that have this incredible ethos, and all over the walls is written, what they're doing for their local community, and how they're inviting the local community into their offices to use their space, and how they're educating local kids, and how they're growing their own vegetables, and all of that then ends up in the food that they feed to their staff, and just trying to be one of the good guys. And if businesses can do that, it seems a bit like a cost, but it really isn't, because what you get from your people is huge loyalty, and they will go over and above for a business that has an ethos. What you get from the local community is so much goodwill, and wanting to do business with you, and wanting to recommend you and advocate for you. And if there is a problem, they overlook it because they fundamentally believe that you're good guys. Yeah. So bottom line benefit, and just that deathbed moment of, we had the opportunity to influence things for better or worse, and we chose to influence things for better. And I feel good about that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Blair. Really 3 great points. And I think the last one, you'll install your first point, trust.
Yeah.
If you've got that bond and a relationship, and you're doing the right and the good things.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great episode that was. Really good. And hopefully everybody that's listened can relate to a lot of your points in a number of ways there today. So thank you very much. So finally, contact details then, Blair. The details about the book, as we've already touched on, but again, repeat that for me. That would be great. And if you hand over to you and sell yourself as much as you can.
So yes, please buy the book. It's Punks in Suits, How to Lead the Workplace Reformation. And like I say, you just stick it in your search engine, and wherever you like to buy your books, it'll come up. Best place to contact me, so either LinkedIn, because I love LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's my favourite social media platform.
Yeah.
Or my website, which is thatpeoplething.com.
Okay.
And everything, if you want me to come and speak in an event, or you want me to come and run some workshops, or just, just want a bit of informal input, having listened to something on here, or watched it, in fact, just drop me a line.
Yeah.
I'm really, really happy to help. It's a great industry, and I want to do what I can to help you guys.
Brilliant. Blair Palmer, thank you very much. That was really insightful, and I enjoyed every single moment. So thank you for joining us on the industry podcast, Call Yourself a Wholesaler.
Thank you.
And I'll see you very soon.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Blair.